Hello, my name is Ryan Freeman. Welcome to my life. Welcome to Shabarm Park. I am back at the park. I used to make videos only at the park. Then I started making them in my room. But one of the issues sorry, I'm going to clean this off. One of the issues with making your videos at your house is all of the noise from leaf blowers and gardeners and neighbors and delivery people. And although the park obviously has some ambient noise, I prefer squirrels and birds and hikers than leaf blowers. So with that being said, this is episode 4 of a European adventure story. Today I'm going to talk about our time with my Uncle Bob. So I will just talk about it as honestly as possible, give you my perspective. I was somewhat the person in the middle between my Uncle Bob and my wife Yukiko. But first, it started off really nice. My Uncle Bob is a very fun-loving guy. He likes to dazzle you. He wants to show you the best time possible, and he likes to have fun. So he was taking us to concerts on beautiful sunset bars. There was one bar called the Honesty Bar, and it's called the Honesty Bar because there's no bartender. There's a full bar, and you can help yourself to the liquor and the mixers, and then it's up to you if you want to leave the money. So it's the Honesty Bar. I really like that. And there was a show happening that night by a musician, a Scandinavian musician named Christopher Lowe. I only remember that name because that was the same name of one of my classmates when I was in middle school. And Christopher Lowe had this very ethereal, sort of weird, interesting type of music. Just to give you guys a little insight into how my Uncle Bob works, which I find fascinating and always fun, but may not be for everyone's taste, was when we got to the bar, we were the first ones. My uncle always wants to have the perfect spot to be at the right location at the right time. So we arrived at the bar super early and placed like a little sarong or a blanket on top of a couple cushions, and these cushions were first come first serve. So if you wanted to have a front row seat or whatever seat you wanted, you'd have to get to this bar early. There was no tickets. This was a free entrance. I think it was a free entrance. We might have actually, no, I take that back. It was not free entrance. You had to pay a very small amount, probably like $10. That included 2 free drinks. And then it was a first come first serve to wherever you wanted to sit. And my Uncle Bob wanted to sit front row right in front of the band, so he lays out his blankets on these cushions, and then we go to the Honesty Bar, have some drinks, and pay an honest price. And he shows us just this gorgeous sunset, and I think you might see Gracie, my little Cocker Spaniel, wandering in the background. Hopefully no coyotes come pick her up. Always worried about that, but what can you do? All right, enough about that. So yeah, it was a beautiful way to start off this magical evening. But when we go back to our seats, there's 2 women and a young child, not a young child, probably about a 12-year-old. Sorry, I was looking for my water. Same color as the blanket I'm sitting on. Yeah, so there was 2 women and a child sitting on our blankets on the front row prime spot if you want to get blasted by the music, which my uncle did. And so my uncle tells her, sorry ladies, these are our spots we reserved. And by the time we arrived back, so we put our blankets there when there was no one in the entire sitting area. When we got back, it was all crowded, all full, because the concert was just about to start. Now, I'm the type of nervous Nelly that I would be worried about someone taking my seats, and I wouldn't have waited to the very last minute to come back. But my Uncle Bob is not that type. And so he tells these women, these are our seats. And these women are like, no, how can you say that? We've been sitting here for the last 30 minutes. And my Uncle Bob says, you see that blanket? That's my blanket. And to be fair to the women, and the child who took our seats, his blanket pretty much blended in with the decor. I mean, these were just soft cushions. It looked like someone's living room outside on this beautiful terrace deck. But his blankets didn't necessarily really stand out that someone was marking this territory. It wasn't like a blanket in the sand. It was a blanket on a cushion. So to their credit, I could totally see why they wouldn't have known that someone had marked this territory. But my Uncle Bob does not suffer any disagreement. No babbling back to him. And so and my Uncle Bob is a really nice guy, really loving guy, really. But when he gets angry, his face contorts into the most devilish or evil Native American spirit you could imagine, and he leans in on these women and just I don't know what he said, but he put his face really close to their faces, and he got up and left. And sure enough, everyone's looking at us. This long-haired American, my Japanese wife, and my wild Uncle Bob. And interesting thing that I didn't note, looking at all of those faces looking at us during this little altercation, if you want to call it that, was that everyone looks sort of the same. And that was something that I noticed about Madeira. Now, that's a generalization and a stereotype. Obviously, there's a lot of exceptions, but by and large, most of the people in Madeira looked very similar, like they were all cousins. Same olive skin, same sort of light brown hair. Very, very good-looking people, don't get me wrong, but very similar-looking style. And so, yeah, we got our seats. But that's the way my Uncle Bob does things. And so it was interesting. And the concert was powerful. We were right in front of Christopher Lowe. And, I just saw a beautiful Cooper's hawk fly right past me. That's the wonder of doing a video at a park. You never know what you're going to run into. Back to the story. Great concert. That was just an idea of what my Uncle Bob introduced us to. He took us to farmers markets where you got to meet the farmers. And unlike American farmers markets, in an American farmers market, especially the ones in California, you're paying a premium. You're paying a really high price. Hopefully, and I think probably generally, you get a higher quality product. But farmers markets here in California are not cheaper than the supermarket. Farmers market in Madeira, I think it's like how a real farmer's market should be. You're getting weird, not weird, but you're getting like legit produce and eggs from the farmers and at a dirt cheap prices. And Madeiran supermarkets are cheap. And the farmers markets were just really cheap, but you had to go only at a certain hour and you'd have to drive up a mountain road to reach it. So that was cool. I loved first of all, really seeing what Madeiran life was like, both the mundane things of getting your food, like going to a farmer's market or going to the different types of grocery stores and just seeing how the locals live and eat. But I also like going to the concerts, and my Uncle Bob has a wide assortment of friends. He always has. He has friends scattered throughout the world from all of his travels. As I mentioned in episode 1, he's a fantastic letter writer. He keeps in great contact with people. He sometimes has falling outs with them, like he has with me. But that's not about this. Or is it? So, my Uncle Bob has very interesting friends, and I'll just describe a few of them. One of the first ones he introduced us to, and he builds them up before he introduces us to them. He really, my Uncle Bob takes a very keen interest in people, and I think that artists tend to do that. I think that's one of the reasons, like a really good novelist can describe characters in such detail and bring them to life. And I think artists and perhaps psychologists, or just perhaps people who have a certain eye for characteristics of people, can do that. So my Uncle Bob's telling us about his friends, and they have like these mythical proportions, but generally they lived up to them. So one of the people that he introduced us to was the Viking woman, and she was a 6'1" Swedish girl, blonde, strong, massive feet, and he told us that he hired her to do manual labor, digging trenches on his land, and she did the work of 3 men, and in half the time. And she had the toughest feet on the island. She walked on the most dangerous, rocky ledges and beaches and cliffs, no shoes. And sure enough, when I finally met this girl, I was like, damn, you know, sometimes when you come to the presence of a powerful individual, I felt that from this girl, woman. And her feet were indeed very impressive. I'm the type of person, if you have tough feet, big tough feet, I think that's a compliment. I've got big tough feet. I go running barefoot in these very hills right behind me. So I was quite impressed by this woman. And she, I think, sort of, I'm not going to say typifies, because I don't want to talk about something that I don't know, but just from what I understand from my Uncle Bob, it's like, you know, there's a lot of people who could earn a better living in their country of Sweden, in this girl's example. But they choose to live on Madeira, where it's hard to earn a living because there aren't that many jobs. And this woman was just working odd jobs like digging trenches for my uncle, probably for a pittance. He's a bit of a slave driver when it comes to overseeing people. I'll get to that later. Or she's working as like a DJ or a DJ's assistant. Not a lot of steady work, but the island's very inexpensive to live on, and it's such a cool, relaxed culture. And the sort of the circles that my uncle moved in, they were the bohemian, vegetarian, vegan, pot-smoking group, you know, artistic group. And so he introduced us to this lovely French girl. She was an artist. She had a little store in one of the beach bars, very humble store, but all stuff she made from the coral and the rocks that she found. And her husband, this tall German guy who very charismatic, but really into far out conspiracy theories. Like, he told me that Trump was like actually friends with Obama, and Obama was going to come back and he was the Antichrist, and he was so, you know, charismatic people can be very persuasive, and he was just so sure of himself that it was like a religious conversion whenever I was talking with this guy. But a nice guy too. Him and his lovely French wife, who wasn't like that at all. She was just the sweetest woman I've probably met on that trip. The two of them had actually walked around the entire island, like just about every trail. So I got some very good information from them that I ended up using later on, and I'll get to that later. And he had a local friend who was into drinking like silver. Like, I'm not into this stuff. I'm not trying to knock it, but I find it interesting that other people are into this. But like drinking like oxidized silver, probably not saying it right, excuse me if you're one of these people. Oxidized gold, like ingesting minerals to restore parts of their brain. My uncle, whose teeth were not in good shape, he thought if he chewed comfrey root, that would restore his teeth. I don't know. I don't know. I think we live in a mysterious world. There are obviously medical Western science doesn't have the end all to human health, and there are some perhaps alternative medicines that do work for some people. And the placebo effect alone, if you believe in your medication or believe in your treatment, it will most likely have some sort of effect. But just wanted to mention that, not to criticize it, just to give you guys an idea of the type of friends that my Uncle Bob was introducing us to. And so, yeah, he was a good host. He drove us around to all sorts of cool places, cafes that were quaint, and little bars and little ponchas, and so it was a great time. And his house, this was a house, as I mentioned in a previous video. His wife had found this land. They designed this house. She passed away. He ended up finishing the construction. It was a house built by an artist. You know, the steps, everything was to his specifications. On the top floor where we lived, it was all made, the floor was all made from cork that was from bottles of Madeiran wine. There were glass steps, there were seashells everywhere. I don't have pictures of all of this, so you just have to follow me, but there were beautiful decks overlooking the ocean. He had an amazing library that also was a studio where we could watch films and special buttons for lighting. It was a pretty cool house to live in. But and I don't know if this is peculiar to all artists, but it is to my Uncle Bob. He had very high expectations on everything. So like, and he was this way when I met him in Europe as well. Like, you know, you couldn't use any towel. You had to use these towels. You had to treat the toilet just right. You had to, after every bath, use a squeegee, and be extra careful about water spots. He was very high standard of cleanliness. This wild guy. And so I knew that, and but from living with him before when I was a young buck. And so anytime you're living with other people, and especially when you are a guest in someone's house, like, you want to make the best impression. You want to be of use if they need help. And so we treated his house with extra care. We always washed the dishes. We cooked as often as we could. And then he had things that my wife could do that he couldn't do, like untangling weird decorations. And he had clothes with holes in them that he asked her to mend. And the thing is, and this is going back to my Uncle Bob's sort of a slave driver, is that he has a tendency to try to get a lot out of you if he can. I think, honestly, so this is I don't want this to be about, this is just my honest opinion. I'm not trying to blame him or anything like that, but like when my friend Paul and I visited him when I was 21, he put us through some back-breaking labor. Back-breaking labor. He tried to do that to my brother once, and who visited him like a few years before we got there. And we had never discussed coming there to work for him or anything like that. I mean, he wanted us to come visit. In fact, the very first day, and over the course of several days, and he was introducing us to all of his friends, and he was so happy to introduce us. Mi sobrino, he would say, my nephew, to everyone with such pride, and I was so happy. And everyone would say, "How long are you going to stay?" And I said, well, we don't know yet. We're thinking about maybe 2 months or whatnot. And he would say, "I want you guys to live here. My Uncle Bob said you guys could live here if you want." He was so happy that we were there. And I was touched by that. But I still knew in the back of my head that not a lot of time had gone by. And whenever you first meet with someone or move in with someone, there's always a little bit of a honeymoon period before you start to get on each other's nerves, and before feelings of sort of that novel, happy feeling starts to wear off. So I was okay. I try to put my best foot forward. My wife was amazing, doing all of the dishes. I did dishes too, but my Uncle Bob had an easy time. He wasn't doing dishes anymore, and did a little cooking, but not much. And we shared food. Gracie, oh, chasing a squirrel. All right, sorry about that. I feel like he kept trying to push us to get more, and he kept started hinting that my wife should be his gardener. And I think that sort of got on her nerves, got on my nerves. And he just has that tendency to do this. And so feelings started to get, I think, a bit ruffled. And then also, always wanted us to go on every expedition with him, and he was restless. Whereas sometimes me and my wife, we just wanted to sit and read, or have not such a busy day, and he couldn't accept that. It would hurt his feelings. Like one time I didn't want to go to the farmer's market with him, and that when I told him that, it looked like it crushed him. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Bob, are you okay?" And he just like, "No, I'm fine." And so feelings and our relationship started to fray a little bit. I brought a ton of movies. He made specific requests, so I downloaded these movies and TV shows on my computer. We'd watch these at night, drink beer. We were having a great time, but there was also this building and rising tension. And he was very fond of my wife, Yukiko. You know, I had mentioned in episode 1 that he had sent her lots of letters, very romantically written. Not explicitly romantic, but you know, with flair and gusto and enticing, even once with crushed rose petals there. And my uncle, I think my wife is my uncle's type. Sorry, I thought I saw my older brother Nathan running, because he runs in this park. So I guess doing videos at the park is a little distracting. Apologize for that. I'll probably do it back in my room next video if you don't like this. But so yeah, feelings started to get a little frayed. My uncle was a little attracted to my wife. I started to get that feeling, and he was, as my wife said, touchy, you know, a little too, you know, he's a hugger. My Uncle Bob is a hugger, and he's lived in Europe with lots of friends that kiss and give each other nude massages. And my wife is from Japan, and if anyone knows what East Asian culture is like, particularly Japan, it's not a hugging culture, it's not a kissing culture, it's not a touching culture. Like when I taught in Japan, and I'd say, "Well, what do you do when you see a friend that you haven't seen so long?" They just go, "Hi." You know, it's not like they run up and give hugs and kisses. And so cultural difference there, right? And my wife, obviously, she lived in America for a couple years before we've come here. She's not as Japanese in those ways as perhaps the average Japanese girl, but my Uncle Bob was full on, and he liked her, man. He just liked her. You could see that. And my Uncle Bob's so warm, and so he's like throwing this energy at you. But she was rejecting it. You know, she has boundaries. Everyone has different boundaries. And I think, if I could say anything, like, I don't think my Uncle Bob really understood what her boundaries were, and so she had to sort of put up a bigger and bigger wall with him. And then that led to him sort of being sort of frustrated, like, "Why isn't your wife so friendly with me anymore?" Like, I don't think he got it. And I think I tried to talk to him and explain what was happening from my perspective. And "Hey, Gracie, come on, baby. I don't mind you chasing squirrels, but don't make that noise." And she's a good dog. I don't really have to worry about her. So, except for shaking by the tripod. And so yeah, you know, he's our host, and he's giving us the red carpet, showing us all these amazing places, introducing us to his friends, telling us we could live with him forever, taking us to awesome swim spots, letting her use his deceased wife's swimming equipment, flippers and whatnot. He was really good to us. I got to use his library. We had full use of his house. I was very thankful to be there. But we had, with that, this pressure of not disappointing him, and he had a lot of expectations. And also this sort of, that wasn't such a big issue. I think we could have gotten by with that, but the big issue was that my wife was putting up a barrier between her and Bob. And And my Uncle Bob couldn't understand that. And it wasn't only my Uncle Bob, so there was another thing that was happening. So it's like, the conversations you have when you're with your friend, your best friend, is slightly different than your conversation you have with your spouse or your grandmother or your child. And so when I'm with my wife, obviously, we have a great relationship. Otherwise, we wouldn't be together. And I have a great relationship with my Uncle Bob, but it's a different type. My Uncle Bob, he wants to, and I do as well, talk about things guys talk about. And my wife, I think she overheard some of our conversations. We're talking on the deck. She's perhaps in the room. We had a hammock in this room. It was kind of cool. Also, back to the slave driving thing. My Uncle Bob made me build a mosquito net for this entire section, which was actually kind of cool because I never knew how to do much carpentry or woodwork, and so he taught me how to choose the boards of wood and saw them and drill holes, and so it was kind of learned some man skills to make this mosquito net, which actually we didn't end up using because we ended up getting kicked out of his house. And how that went about was my wife, like I said, who's now walking with my baby, she's just coming from the store. My wife just got to the point where she was fed up and she wanted to leave. She did not like to stay there. She did not like Uncle Bob. He scared her, I think, and my Uncle Bob was overall just extraordinarily frustrated that my wife didn't love him or didn't like him. And even there was this one point where we were drunk, and I had this sort of sneaking suspicion that my uncle sort of had the hots for my wife. And I told him, I said, Bob, you can't fuck my wife. And I would never say that sober, but we were drunk and in a good mood. And he said, that's your hang-up, man. That's just like your hang-up, man. So I don't know if that was my hang-up that I wouldn't let him fuck my wife, or that was my hang-up that I was even thinking about that. But I got the feeling that it was the first part, the first option there. But I didn't mind because I knew my wife would never do that with him, and I knew that he would never be physical about that. So, the fact that my old uncle had these ideas, well, I can't do anything about that. Humans are humans, But it definitely added a little tension to the whole mix, that it was so obvious, and I think it definitely affected her. And as gracious as my Uncle Bob was in showing us a good time, he was also, and he's always been this way, it's like when he wants to do something, he's doing it. And so he would always stop his car at just random times to smoke weed or to talk to girls that he saw on the way. He was horny as a motherfucker. He was looking for poon constantly, as he always has been. And I made a little drawing of my uncle when I was angry at him that sort of encapsulated how I saw him. Maybe I'll put that, maybe I won't, I don't know. But we were coming back, and we had stopped already a ton of times after a long day at the city. My wife's tired, I'm tired, and my uncle says, let's go have one more drink, and let's go to this bar. My wife says, I want to go home. I don't want to go to that bar, because she doesn't drink anyways. And he's like, well, I'll drop you off here. You can walk to the house. It wasn't far. I mean, a couple hundred meters, a few hundred meters. My wife, that was like the last straw. She just thought that was so inconsiderate that he wouldn't just drive her to his house, which was not far. He couldn't understand why on earth she'd be so selfish and not allow him just to drive directly to the bar and drop her off. And you know, we all have a boiling point. Well, her boiling point was reached, and she jumped out of the car. I chased after her, and it was just a big issue. He ends up going to the bar, coming back, and we end up having a discussion, hard discussion about this. And he wants her to apologize. She refuses to apologize. She is pissed. One thing I'll say about my wife, she's a very easygoing person, actually. You might not get that impression from this video, but she is. But she trusts her feelings, and she felt that she was on the right side, and Bob is the same way, and so they were sort of irreconcilable. Now I was in the middle, and I love both of them. I love my wife, obviously, mother of my child now, and I'm the person I'm married to and the person I'm on this trip with, but I love my uncle as well, and I'm trying to find some middle ground. So I'm trying to play mediator, but my mediation is not working. It's like I think I might have made it worse, or I made both of them angry at me, or at least my Uncle Bob. And there was just, I tried to reason. I tried just to find some way, but I couldn't. It was just irreconcilable. My wife was not going to apologize. She thought my uncle was a bit of a monster at this point, being touchy-touchy and inconsiderate and trying to make her like Cinderella. My uncle thought she was being ungrateful and cold, like a cold ice queen to him now. He couldn't see her point of view. I try to explain it as easy as possible because she doesn't speak perfect English. He couldn't understand it. So, and then he started to blame me. He started saying I was being dishonest because I wasn't agreeing with him. And this was something I mentioned from video 1. If you disagree with his narrative, it's just like you start to become the devil, and he even starts to look at you like you've allowed Satan inside. He's a deeply spiritual person. And if you've ever met very spiritual people, they can be saints, but then when they flip, their devil side's even bigger. It's like and people who are saintly or very spiritual can tend to be very serious, you know. And when it's like, and then when they see you as on the side of evil, it's like they're even worse to you than a non-spiritual person would be. And so this went really bad. He ended up getting really angry. And the funny thing is he didn't think he was angry. I had an argument with him one time before, so there was a few arguments that, not about Yukiko, but about other things. Like, he was always trying to get me to read this book that was about the Illuminati orchestrating Armageddon. And I would take a look at it. I wasn't interested in it at all. But he kept trying to push it on me. And I would take a look and I would go, oh, Bob, I just wanted to point this out. You know, there's so many typos in this book. I'm the type of person that if I see a lot of typos and a lot of poor writing, I sort of take that as a general indication that the person's at least not very careful. And I find that a lot of things that my Uncle Bob sends to me are sort of that way. A couple people checking out my wife. She's waiting for me. We'll wrap this up very soon. So, maybe I'm inconsiderate. Maybe I got that from my Uncle Bob. Any case, I'll wrap this up. So, so we had a big argument about this thing that he's trying to push down me, and I wouldn't try to argue. I can't lie. I can't say I think you're right if I don't think you're right. And so as he keeps pushing me on this topic, I disagree with him. And he gets angry, and I go, whoa, bro, I didn't mean to make you angry. And he goes, I'm not angry. I'm never angry. And you can't hurt me anyways. Anyone who attacks me, it's like rubber bullets bouncing off of me. And so I was like, whoa. Well, I can't calm your anger if you're not angry, but that looks like fury and rage to me. So when we had this big blowout with my wife, He got really angry, fled the house, emailed me and her, I want you to leave my house within 24 hours. And if you don't, then bad consequences will happen. So here we are. We've flown across the world to stay with him for 2.5 months, 2 months, which was the only reason I brought a bunch of shit, you know. I had a snorkel, I had a laptop, I had all of these things because I was worried he might kick us out. He had even warned that he might kick us out. Then he had us cancel our tickets. And then I only bought the tickets on his assurance that he wouldn't kick us out. And now he's kicking us out. And to really get the background, you really got to go back to the first episode to understand how much of a sting that was to me. Because it just, you know, you have expectations and plans and then they're all gone. But there's nothing I could do. So we packed our things. You know, when the ship's sinking, all you can do really, and you can't fix the ship. You tried, but there's no way to fix it. All you can do is get your stuff ready and get ready for the swim. So I started getting our stuff ready. I was boiling inside. I was full of rage. And I didn't even deign to reply to him, actually. I was so angry. I thought it best not to. And I even actually, I don't know, maybe it was like to try to take the moral high horse or whatnot, to be like the good person. Maybe it was for my own conscience sake. But my wife suggested that we leave the house in wonderful condition. So I even fixed that mosquito net that he forced me to make a few days earlier. It had some flaws with it. She sewed the last of his socks up. I transferred all of the movies I knew he would want to watch onto his USB. Yeah. So even though I was furious and she was furious, I think she was probably a little happy. Maybe this was exactly what she wanted. She was done with Uncle Bob. And she actually wanted to travel. Maybe it was Yukiko's fault. I don't know. It's hard to say. But, we left his house better than when we got there. And we brought a ton of Japanese food. Her soul food that she'd be able to eat over the course of those 2.5 months there. We had to leave that all. There was just no way we could carry it all. I mean, we were overburdened with things. This was not... We had no idea where we were going to go. What the fuck were we going to do? That was in my head. And then suddenly, I had to snap into action. And this problem, this issue that I did not want to happen, that I tried to stop from happening before we got there through multiple discourses and emails and trying to mediate while we were there and everything within my power, I could not stop it. I was now being ejected from Uncle Bob's with my wife with an overloaded backpack, no itinerary, no schedule of trains or buses or ferries, just our feet, a heavy backpack, and being forced out of my uncle on this island that we sort of know, but not really. And then I remembered, oh yeah, Uncle Bob's friend, that charismatic German, he said, this spot is a really cool spot. And I remembered the day before, there was a bus that my uncle told me, that bus goes to that spot. And then I realized I would have to rely on my instincts as a backpacker, these instincts that had laid dormant for about a decade. A part of me that I hadn't tapped into in a while, this survival mode, started to rev its engine. And with that, the whole journey transformed, and for the better. And in a future episode, I will get into now our sojourn away from Bob's, me and my wife, not knowing where we're going to go, trusting our survival instincts and the adventure that comes. My name's Ryan Freeman. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for putting up with all of the distractions. I will go take care of my wife and baby who are sitting comfortably in the shade. Do not worry. And my Cocker Spaniel is very happy as well. Thank you. I will see you for episode 5 in the near future. Bye.